Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the June 16th, 2020 Operations Committee meeting. We have one item, is that right? A long item, 21st Century School Buildings Program Summer Update.
And a written update if there's any questions from the
right on the ESCO contracts. So I think we're ready to go with the first item.
So I don't see Dorothy Hellman on the call yet. So if you have any questions about the written update, I'm going to try and get a hold of Dorothy via her cell phone.
Okay. Did the city is there someone online for the ESCO contracts?
Yes, several of us.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Did the city actually issue an RFP for a company to provide the ESCO contracts?
An RFI.
An RFI, and what does that mean, and how is that different from an RFP?
So we piggybacked we piggybacked on top of a Maryland Department of General Services RFP. So 9 ESCOs were determined to be qualified enough to provide energy service company products and services for the Department of General Services. And then we, Baltimore City Public Schools, issued an RFI, a request for information about specifics that we wanted from that list of qualified contractors.
So did we issued an RFI to the 9, or was it an
yes,
open?
Sir. We issued it only to the 9 who are qualified by the Maryland Department of General Services.
How many proposals did we receive?
We received 6.
That was the only question I had. Thanks.
Yeah, I have a couple, Andy.
Go. Yeah.
Okay, I guess one, you talk about piggyback. Where does the state end and the city begin? I mean, the school system begins in terms of this whole process? Because it talks about piggyback, but looks like the decisions we make are ours.
That's correct. So the only involvement the state had at all is that they went through their long request for proposal process that they have gone through many times before in order to determine which energy service companies were qualified to provide goods and services to anyone within the state. And so then we, quote unquote, piggybacked, we Baltimore City Public Schools piggybacked on that. And then we issued our own request for information. It's not called a request for proposals only because they already won their proposals. And then we issued our own request for information, and we've done everything since then. And in fact, I've had no involvement with the Department of General Services. So the only reason that we did what we did was that we already had a list of qualified energy service companies that we knew were pre-qualified by the state.
Okay, my next question is 2 parts. Okay, the ESCO that you hire is also, they're going to install it, but they also kind of perform it and do their own audit. How can one sufficiently audit something they do? I mean, shouldn't that be where the state comes in or some other entity comes in and looks at the audit and says, hey, you didn't do what you said you're going to do, or you're not performing as well as you said you were?
That's exactly why we hired the entity Maryland Clean Energy Center, and Wyatt Shiflett's on the phone. So I'm going to turn it over to him to explain what he does to do a third-party audit.
Thank you, and good morning. Great question. And sometimes it's called the fox watch in the hen house analogy, and I think it's very prudent. They are required to do the measurement verification. They start the process. They produce an annual report that says, this is what we detected. These are your annual savings. But I agree, and a project sort of wouldn't pass due diligence if it didn't have another level of scrutiny. Clean Energy Center is hired to consult on this project, and we recommend that an owner's rep be installed for $10,000, a minor cost, to have independent engineers come around and validate the annual savings reports. We advise our clients for the last few years to do that. We've had a very good success recently at the Institute for Biotechnology and Bioscience Research. They've done just that. The vendor they chose to hire was called Celtic Energy. But there's no shortage of vendors that will take on almost this owner's rep, this independent engineering role. And I think that's a critical function that we have to build into this project. The pilot is just lighting. So I think that the goal of this pilot is to demonstrate this process works well for Baltimore City Public Schools, and it can be a tool to use on larger projects. But the goal of the pilot is to demonstrate that it works internally, and this is one of the internal things that need to be validated, is that we can monitor the savings, and the way to do that is to hire a third party.
One last question. I'm pretty old, so I'm not good about the math with this. Andy probably can help me. When you guys came up with the total, the net or gross savings of $1 million, I'm going back to my college math. That number's overstated by virtue of the fact that you didn't discount the cash flow. Shouldn't those savings per year be discounted because the value of future dollars are a lot less than present dollars?
The answer is yes. It will end up being less in today's dollars.
So how can we create a discount rate where that number looks more realistic than the $1 million you came up with?
Sure, we can discount it at whatever rate you'd like. At a 6% discount rate, the value in today's dollars would be something like $700,000 of savings.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess my question is, I defer to Andy because Andy knows more about this than I do. But yeah.
I think it makes sense to discount it at 6%, which is a more accurate portrayal of the value of the savings.
Sure.
I have a question that was raised the last time we had our conversation about this, which is what is it that can go wrong with this? I know we've had a sort of checkered history with the ESCO. We had some issues with maintenance and some disputes about why the energy savings were not achieved. Have we kind of addressed that in this new round, and what can still go wrong with this?
Sure, no, that's an excellent question. So the way that we have tried to address this is several-fold. One, we're only working with energy service companies that have already gone through the RFP process with the Department of General Services. Two, we are starting with just a pilot project, which is lighting and lighting controls as opposed to HVAC systems and services. Three, we've hired Maryland Clean Energy Center, which is an entity that's been appointed by the governor to help us make sure that we're meeting all the goals and requirements effectively. Four, we've been working with Blaine Lipsky and Raj Bachupai from the beginning, the operations team within Lynette's group, to make sure that the operations and maintenance costs are being effectively handled. So I think, it is a small project. The last project, which was in 2008, 2009, was a $60 million project. This is a $3 to $4 million project. And basically we're testing the waters again to see whether or not by doing just this project, we can create the energy savings and have the staff at Baltimore City Public Schools to ensure that we're covering and making sure that the ESCOs are doing what they say they're doing.
Claire, this is Wyatt. I would add that we had the ESCOs up front bid future costs. So the O&M costs, the maintenance, and we've had a lot of discussion with the ESCOs about what that maintenance is. Where in the past, maybe those conversations weren't had early before contracts were signed, but we have a very good understanding of how many times the ESCO will visit the sites included in an annual cost that we know. Claire sent some cash flows around, but we have certainty on the contractual arrangement of how much we would pay for operations and maintenance. And within the contract, vehicle will know exactly what services they're providing for maintenance. So I think that goes a long way in tightening up the contracts where there's no misunderstanding about who's to do what. You know the amount that you're paying, and you weave into the contract the frequency and the services that you'll get. That's just for the maintenance. When you come to savings, similar. They projected how much we would save in operation and maintenance with reduction in Baltimore City Public Schools staff time and effort. Once again, that's something that we would negotiate. They've shown us the numbers, and we either accept that or don't accept it, but that would get included into the savings side of things. So I think we have a pretty good look at what the ESCO is representing as the project results ahead of time. And then it would be up to us to hold them to those standards.
Okay.
So the last thing I would just say is just to remind the board that the pilot is a proof of concept. I mean, the purpose of the pilot is to test all these belts and suspenders that we put in place to try to make sure that this is not risky for us, because we've had such poor experiences with ESCOs before. So that's why we've tried to put all these controls in place and are doing a pilot. And then as a result of this pilot, we would determine whether we want to go to more. But this is just 15 schools. So that's
Right.
the other thing.
And
Okay.
just like,
This process is $3 million. Claire mentioned an ESCO we did before was 60 million. What were the best practices and what did we learn from the previous program, which was 20 times bigger than this, that can help us ensure that everything's going to be okay going forward?
I mean, I think one thing is to try a pilot first, to let's not go in at $60 million and then find out it doesn't work. So I think that was one key learning that we tried to put in place. And then I think bringing our organization in to help us was another one, but I'll turn to Wyatt and Claire to talk about the other key reasons why we designed the pilot the way we did.
So you're saying that $60 million wasn't a complete success?
Correct, it was not.
It was not. No, I mean, a number of things happened to make that not work out well for the system, including the cost of energy went down considerably through BrickPack, through an agreement that was separate during that time. So the cost naturally went down of the energy, that then meant that there were no savings that were garnished. That was one of the key reasons why there were no savings from that. We're still paying off some of that equipment.
Commissioner Reed, this is Blaine. At the time of the $60 million project, the ESCOs, they based it on a rate that was at the present time, but then they deregulated the rates, and our rate went below what they anticipated. So where it was like 11 or 12 cents a kilowatt or therm, it went down to 8 and 9 cents. So we weren't really achieving it as much. But had we not entered the ESCO contract at the time, there probably would have been a catastrophic failure to a lot of systems. And we did, in a short-term period, replace a substantial number of boilers and other key components to the school district that otherwise would have been, we didn't have the money for at the time. And then with the escalating costs that were built in for service, as well as O&M maintenance, verifications and other operations between the 3 or 4 ESCOs, it wasn't, the operations budget couldn't sustain the budget anymore.
So the whole thing was a good process, but because of energy deregulation and the prices going down, that hurt you. That's
Yes,
what you're
it
saying?
did.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And to the commissioners, I'd like to state that the ESCOs guarantee a consumption reduction. And we have to understand that they don't take a commodity risk. They're not in the business, and this is how every other county in the state does it. You know, your neighboring counties that do ESCOs for their public, or do energy performance contracts for their public school buildings, none of them have a contract where the ESCO takes on the risk of energy prices in the future. It's just not their business model. That's not what they do. But what they will guarantee is a reduction in consumption.
Okay.
So if energy prices spike and you didn't do an EPC contract and you have the same consumption, your budget's really going to be in peril, because you didn't predict that energy rates would go up 20%. If you do a project like this, you will reduce your consumption, but if energy rates go up 20%, you might not have a year-over-year monetary savings, but you're going to have a year-over-year benefit because your consumption is drastically less. And I think that point has to be understood, that the contract's designed to guarantee a reduction in energy consumption, and it's validated. There's a process. The Baltimore City Public Schools signs off on the measurement verification plan, all that is agreed to. There's no way that the ESCO can sort of get one up on you, because we're all agreeing to the validation process of how you measure consumption, but nobody is sort of taking the risk of where energy rates will be in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, we should probably leave it there. Thanks very much, Claire,
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
and everybody else. Wyatt.
Thanks, Claire and
Thanks,
Wyatt.
Commissioners.
Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it
Okay.
and all your work on this.
Yeah, look forward to hearing more. Okay, Dorothy, welcome.
Hi. Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, there's my presentation. Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, commissioners. I'm Dorothy Hellman, Executive Director for the 21st Century Program, and I'll be providing the summer update this morning. Next slide. The agenda, again, very typical. I'm going to review the year 1 and year 2 schools, the impact of COVID-19 on construction. I'll talk a little bit about swing transportation, engagement, and local hiring, and then we'll complete with the next school opening. Next slide. So out of the year 1 schools, all are open except Patterson and Claremont. This is scheduled to be opened in September of next year, and that will complete the year 1 school progress. Next slide. For plan year 2, of the 17 schools that are in year 2, 4 are complete. 8 others are under construction, 4 is in design, and 1 is in feasibility studies. Next slide. So when Commodore John Rogers is completed, that will be the last one in 2024, but for us, the program will be substantially completed in 2022. And again, as you guys are aware, Commodore John Rogers trails only because they're using the same swing space as Highlandtown. Next slide. Where COVID is concerned. We've had a lot of instances of COVID-19 on our project sites, several illnesses. They've all been well managed, and by our contractors, we've now gone beyond shutting down the entire project site when there's an illness to performing continuous and then some targeted cleaning and sanitizing when warranted. The access to get to our sites is pretty rigorous. There's some mandatory things that we need to follow. There is a photograph at the top left corner of your screen, and there's a person in a white suit. This is now mandatory on all our projects. We do have a third-party healthcare company. They're the ones who actually ensures that everyone fills out the questionnaire. They take your temperature. They provide you with a wristband. And the color of the wristband is changed every day, more like a Disneyland or Universal, to ensure that no one tries to slip into the project sites. Right now, most of our project sites have been impacted. Walter P. Carter, Mary E. Rodman, Medfield, and Patterson. But again, construction continues on all our sites. Construction progress. These are pictures of Mary E. Rodman. Despite COVID, we're still progressing with all our projects. These project pictures were taken just a few weeks ago. The project is still on schedule to be opened in, I know I said September, but it really should be August because we're opening a little bit earlier. Work is progressing both at the interior and the exterior of the building. The kitchen's almost installed, the elevator's been installed, or internal health suite has been inspected by the state. We made a few adjustments, but we're progressing. MSA, however, they were hoping to get the project done by June of this year, but due to COVID, we did have some delays. It will be open in July, which still provides, again, sufficient time for us to deliver and install furniture and install or instructional IT devices. Next slide. Swing location. This chart shows all our schools in swing locations and their move-in, move-out date. We have 9 schools in swing as at June this month. That number will be 10 when school starts in August. Mary E. Rodman will be moving to a permanent location, and we will have Highlandtown and Montebello moving into swing locations to facilitate their schools going under construction. Continuing with swing location, we do have 5 moves this summer, even though it's 3 buildings. Mary E. Rodman will relocate in September. She'll be joined by the students at Sarah M. Roach, and this school will be closed. It's actually on our surplus list, exhibit number 6. Highlandtown will move to the Southeast building. Montebello will be moving to PDC. And the Curtis Bay Middle School students, they will be moving into Baybrook, which was completed last December. Multi-activities are in process for the relocation of our students and our principals and our teachers, including packing, purging, giving students time to return to school to pick up their belongings, since school ended rather quickly for some of them, and recycling is also currently occurring. Next slide, transportation. 9 schools, as I mentioned, will receive yellow bus transportation when school starts in August. Should school reopen, I'll put that caveat there. During the times of uncertainty, or these times of uncertainty, the city schools transportation team, they're actually having multi-meetings right now to determine how that process would work in light of social distancing, temperature tests, availability of personnel to test temperatures on the bus. We're not able to kind of hardline some of these decisions right now, and so we're still looking for guidance from the state. Community engagement. As we're planning for yellow bus transportation, we're also reviewing the safe route walking paths for students, and we do have a few programs in queue. Sarah M. Roach, we do have a walk-in school bus pilot program that we're working on right now with the Office of New Initiatives. This is where volunteers take the place of a bus and they walk the kids to and from school. These are paid positions. Over at Baybrook, we're working with Inspire for cleanup of that path that takes the student from Curtis Bay, takes you through a wooded part to a nearby community center. That path has a lot of brush overgrowth and it has a limited lighting. So we're working with Inspire for improvement of that. Over at Hartford Heights, where construction just started, we are working with the planning team, including Inspire and DOT, for the cleanup of the alleyways, including additional light points and ensuring that we have some crossing guards in place should schools reopen. Community engagement. Merger activities are critical to our school openings. We have 2 schools, as I mentioned earlier, that are merging this summer, Mary E. Rodman and Sarah M. Road students. We also have Curtis Bay Middle School and who are merging into Baybrook. Some of our activities include Love Your School campaign, Acts of Kindness, and Spirit Weeks. We're also going to be providing book bags to our merger schools. Students from Sarah M. Roach will be receiving book bags that has the Mary E. Rodman logo on it, and the students moving from Curtis Bay Middle School will receive book bags that have Baybrook on it. So at least the students feel connected even through a book bag. Internships. as mentioned in my last reporting, due to COVID, we were unable to have companies participate in sponsoring students since most of the offices had staff working from home. And with the construction, interior design, and architecture field being hands-on, it was a risk to bring in students. Due to the continued uncertainty of COVID, the program is still pending rollout for 2020. We're still working with Urban Alliance on a virtual training program for students. We will probably end up paying for a portion of that since the funding has already been approved for the interns. And we will provide an update in the next meeting. But right now we're working on a transition to worksite plan. Continuing with local hiring, despite the fact that our offices are closed, we continue to provide permission for the necessary construction workers to be on site to complete work for schools. Post-COVID, we have, as at May 19th, 2020, we have 311 workers that are working on our sites, again, based on our workaround process. This includes workers who were not normally, who are on site towards the end of a project. They're actually working on interiors or security systems or access systems or landscaping. As soon as the office opens, the backlog will be addressed and we'll take care of the FBI and the Maryland local state background checks. Still with local hiring, we're still waiting for the final numbers to be scrubbed for the Plan Year 1 schools. We do know that Patterson now has an unofficial submission of 11 persons that they had agreed to at the onset of the project. That number is normally tripled or quadrupled by the time the project is closed. We won't know the final tally for Year 1 until the end of 2021 because it takes approximately 6 months for the final numbers to be scrubbed. But as at today, we do have 766 official positions under, or official position hires under Year 1. Under Year 2, we do have updates for the schools that were recently completed. For the last 3 that were nearing the 6-month period, the numbers were scrubbed for address, social security numbers, and we do have 167 positions that we're going to be posting at the next update over at John Rura. We exceeded expectations with 82 new hires or new positions at that school. The unofficial numbers are shown in brackets right next to the company name. You'll see CAM with 25 for Baybrook, Skanska 60 for Calvin Rodwell, Walter P. Carter 17, Medfield 12, Calverton 2. But I don't want you to concentrate on those numbers because again, they're the unofficial numbers. As mentioned earlier, the official numbers are normally 3 or 4 times larger than the initial numbers that they start with. And save the date. We're still planning school openings despite COVID because this is a celebration for the community. We still have it planned to be in person on Wednesday, August the 26th. That is on the mayor's calendar. I'm hoping that it's on all your calendars as well. We'll quickly revert to a virtual or maybe a combination of virtual and in person should there be restrictions in place at that time. But right now we are still planning that grand opening event for Mayor E. Rodman, which is our next school scheduled to be open in August of this year. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. I guess the first is page 11. I guess I'm thinking, I'm putting my kid's hat on right now. If I'm a little kid and I go to Mary Roach, Sarah Roach, and you're telling me that the new kids are going to get, I'm at Mary Rodman. The new kids are going to get book bags, but I don't get one. Wouldn't that be a little bit angry that I don't get one of those new book bags?
So let me clarify that all students will get book bags.
Okay. Okay, that answers
all
that.
Students.
Okay.
No, whether you're just attending for your first year or whether or not you've been there for 7 years, that is a part of the engagement process to ensure that all kids feel equal on the first day of school.
Okay, you answered that question. My other question is on page 10. What's the cost of COVID? One, I guess with the changing in uniforms and all this kind of stuff for the workers, but I guess also what's the expected cost of COVID for the buses? Do we have that?
Unfortunately, I cannot provide numbers at this time. I know that during a normal year, just this past year, the cost for buses were approximately $2 million to the 21st Century program. If we are going to be having social distancing, I do know that the transportation team has looked at several numbers where the amount of buses would need to be increased. We do not have numbers for those as yet. And so I can have Jacinta provide an update for you, but that is still a work in progress.
So now,
Commissioner Reed, I doubt we have numbers. I doubt Jacinta has numbers yet either. I mean, this is, the challenge is not just one of cost, though that is a significant challenge. The challenge is also one of just available buses and available drivers. If we really have to maintain the MSDE guidelines about social distance, we're going to have real problems in terms of how you get, we don't have enough buses or drivers to get students to school in addition to the cost issue you're raising.
Okay. And Allison, this is a question I posed at the board meeting. Is there some way that we can, as commissioners, get to see the worst case costs of COVID in terms of attacking the next budget?
So this is Jacinta, and so we have estimated about 65 million, but that would be not necessarily the cost is the main issues. It's the fact that we wouldn't have adequate, we don't have enough bus drivers or buses for the capacity that we are anticipating if we need the social distance.
No, Jacinta, I wasn't just talking about the buses. I was talking about the total budget.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know if we have that yet, Commissioner Reed. I mean, it all is contingent on what we decide with regard to what school looks like in the fall. And so we don't have those estimates yet in terms of the cost. And it depends on things like, what the school looks like in the fall would have a lot to do with, things like the enterprise fund and how many meals we're serving. And then there's a lot of other unknowns, like, if the FEMA reimbursements that we're applying for right now, those are ending, that FEMA is saying that this whole event ends June 30th. So that's a revenue source that we had that is going away. So there's a lot of kind of also moving pieces in terms of funding sources that we're still estimating the impacts of those too.
And I reiterate, my question is all about the black swans I'm worried about. I'm just worried about black swans.
Say that again?
I'm worried about black swans. Big, costly, unexpected events. That's what I'm worried about.
Okay.
Thank you.
This might be a question for Dorothy or Allison. For the schools that opened in 2017 and 18 and 19, do we have any data on how the students are performing relative to their peers in non-21st century schools? Do we have any? I know part of the argument that we made that we need to invest in new schools is tied to academic performance, at least part of it. Is that information we're trying to collect?
We don't have we've been trying to get various partners to work with to do studies on this, because it's not just, you can't just simply look at their data per se, because it depends on the students they serve and other factors. So, I mean, we could certainly pull out just the raw data for you of the performance of those schools, but that really wouldn't be the way to look at it. There is a RAND study that we worked on, developed. We haven't really gotten much funding for it, has been the challenge. We really did want to do a meaningful, comprehensive comparison of health indicators, of culture, climate indicators, of school performance indicators. There is part of that's funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that's doing some of the health indicators comparison. Because that's the interest of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We also have another study we're doing in partnership with DC that's going to look at some of, again, more of the kind of environmental considerations. We don't have right now funding for the pieces of the RAND outline that we developed that was going to look more at the school performance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Commissioner Roberts, do you have any questions? Still with us? Commissioner Reed, any more questions? There we go.
But no.
Okay.
You and Commissioner Reed asked my questions. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We're good. Hold on a sec. Go to my cheat sheet here. Okay. There's no public comment. Is that correct, Christian?
That's correct.
And the next Operations Committee meeting is July 21st, 2020. It will be a virtual meeting again. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Have
Thank
a
you.
good day. Stay healthy.
Thanks, everybody.